Hey, welcome to another episode of the Pup and Away podcast. My name is Stephanie. You may know me as Steph the Pro Dog Mom on some social media stuff. I'm a certified dog trainer, canine behaviorist, and canine nutritionist, and the very proud owner of Pup and Away in San Antonio, Texas, where we specialize in pet care with a behavioral edge, that is training, boarding, and socialization, all the fun stuff. If you're watching me, you may notice that I have a new camera. When I first decided to start doing video as well as audio, I was like, that's not so bad because I have a shitty camera on my laptop. So it wasn't that crystal clear. It wasn't a very good picture. It's just, kind of grainy, kind of crappy. No biggie, right? I can get on here without any makeup. I would still put makeup on though. My camera broke, and so now I'm using a different one, and now I know what the actors and actresses felt like when high definition became a thing, because you can see everything. Luckily I rotted on the couch for about 14 hours yesterday, so hopefully I look a bit fresh-faced today. But also needing to hydrate, because my skin looking a little dull, I feel like sometimes. But other than that, I apologize also for my 3-week hiatus that I took from you guys. Things have been quite busy at work in a fantastic way, but we are short-staffed and we are hiring. So if you guys know anyone who is looking for a job in San Antonio, we don't hire just anyone. I think that's also a tough thing and why it's taken us so long to hire people, because there needs to either be some sort of experience or some sort of passion there. And the job market, I feel like the people who are looking for jobs, not everyone, this is a very generalized statement, but we're a little passionless right now, but I need passion in my people. So yeah, if you know anyone looking for a job, part-time or full-time, we are hiring at Pup and Away. The other thing about episodes, especially when I don't have a guest, right? So I have been in the pet care industry since 2007. I've worked in various niches, did the vet stuff, obviously the socialization stuff, and now living in the trainer world and diving into nutrition for the past 3 years. I know a little bit about a bunch of stuff, and I listen to a lot of people, very well educated people, very much people that are highly regarded in their industry and what they do. But I still like to research everything, especially before I speak it, especially before I put my name on it, and especially before I make a podcast episode on it. So most of the stuff, all the stuff really that I like to talk about, I spend a lot of time researching, looking up studies, pros and cons and everything, which is why whenever I bring y'all something, especially like we're talking about titers today, but especially when we're talking about the spay and neuter podcast episode, it wasn't a very straight answer, right? It was just a bunch of information for you, the pet parent, to know and consider while you're making that decision for you. And today we're kind of doing the same thing along the lines for vaccinations and titers. Now, as always, I have to tell you guys that I am not a vet. I wanted to be, very much so. When I was growing up, I was like, I'm going to be a vet when I grow up. And I very quickly learned that I'm really terrible at chemistry. I tried for a long time. And I noticed it first when I was in high school, but I had a crappy chemistry teacher. Sorry, Mr. Elizalde. And then went to A&M, and my very first class my very first college course was 8 a.m. chemistry, and I took that as into I'm just not a morning person. So I retook that one and passed by the skin of my teeth at that one. Took OChem, and I actually got a B in OChem, but I had a really amazing professor, and I just realized that I'm not going to get an amazing professor for the rest of my vet career, and my GPA was tanking, so I decided to pivot just a bit. So I forgot exactly where I was going with. I'm not a vet. But I do think that this issue is something that's kind of important to talk about, because I'm not going to say that your vet is wrong by any means, but there's just a lot of normalization that has gone into the vet industry and vaccinations. I definitely feel like we're just kind of on this autopilot of, I get that card in the mail, or that email notification now that says your dog's due for vaccines in 3 months or whatever it is, and we just schedule it. We just schedule that. We're just so used to taking our dogs to the vet for annual vaccinations. And so I wanted to kind of just share some different thoughts and considerations that I've heard, again, from very highly regarded, well-educated people. Most of the stuff that I have been listening to as of most recent are from holistic veterinarians, not from conventional veterinarians, and not to say that one is better than the other. They just definitely practice a bit differently. So as many of you guys know, I try to stay like as holistic and live as chemically free as possible lifestyle, not just for me, but for my dogs as well. The world is full of chemicals, and I think that there is a value for chemicals for like sanitation purposes and things like that. But when we think about our chemical overload and just like how much we're exposed to at all times, it definitely makes me want to limit where I can and when I can those exposures. And so that I kind of have the same mentality when it comes to vaccines as well. Again, something to know about me is I am not an anti-vaxxer. I think modern vaccinations have definitely led humanity to lead a less disease-ridden lifestyle, along with other things, right? Sanitation purposes and, plumbing, indoor plumbing and different things like that, and so many other factors. But again, I like to try to limit my exposure, and especially my dog's exposure, because for me, like, I haven't gotten a vaccination in a very long time. I did not get the COVID vaccination. I did not get any boosters, nothing, not initial, nothing. Think about me as you may, but I just felt like that was a very rushed thing to the market. And I do not consider myself to be a high-risk person, so I chose not to get that. I haven't had a flu vaccine since I was in college, and the only reason why I went to go get a flu vaccine was because it was given for free on campus, and I thought, why not, right? But other than that, I haven't had, a vaccine in quite some time. And so I used to be very pro-vaccination. And again, not to say that I'm anti-vaxxer right now, but so again, like I stated before, I used to work in a vet office. I did all the things. I fed my dogs the prescription diets, even though there was no need for a prescription. My dog was totally healthy. Sully, at that time, he was very healthy. Still is very healthy. But I did everything because the vet said to do it. Plus I wanted to be a vet, right? It's my childhood dream. So I've always had miniature schnauzers growing up my entire life. I have Sully, obviously, now, but I've had, a lineage of schnauzers in my family as well. Not just my parents' dogs, the dogs that I grew up with, my sister's dogs, and all that sort of stuff. And so we have a lot of schnauzers in the family, and all of them pretty much passed away at the age of 12, with the exception of 2 of them. I remember judging my sister really hardcore, my oldest sister, because she had, not because she had a giant, but she had a giant schnauzer. The rest of us had miniature schnauzers. And I remember thinking like, she doesn't deserve to have a dog because she doesn't take her dog to the vet annually for vaccinations. And I just thought that was so irresponsible, again, because the vets say, we get that postcard and you're supposed to go to the vet every year. And I just remember like, she's such a bad dog mom. Like, she's irresponsible. But her giant schnauzer lived past 12. And that kind of surprised me because miniature schnauzers and giant schnauzers do have very similar lifespans. They both between 12 and 15-ish, depending on, what exactly you're looking at. But typically giant breed dogs do tend to have a slightly shorter lifespan than miniature ones or smaller ones, right? It's like on a spectrum. The smaller they go and the bigger they go, the less likely they have a good lifespan there. But I was like, gosh, my sister, this irresponsible woman, how did her dog live past 12 when all of ours passed away at 12? And obviously we cannot say by any means that it was because we gave our dogs vaccinations every year and she didn't, because there's so many factors that go into that, obviously. But it definitely made me kind of like scratch my head and reconsider some things, and that definitely got me thinking. So my goal today is not to turn you off of vaccinations, because again, we need them, our dogs need them, they're important, I see the value of them. love modern medicine. But I think, again, that we tend to treat vaccinations on this autopilot sort of thing, that once a year we're told to give it without any question. We just go to the vet and we, get that needle jab. And I think that there's a little bit more to that. And I think it's time to start questioning and kind of using some critical thinking skills around vaccinations, and to consider, do I go just because it's normalized, and do I actually need to take my dog to the vet for vaccinations? So what is a vaccination, right? We're not going to get down into the nitty gritty, because there are live vaccinations, there are killed vaccinations. There's so much that goes into it. There's a whole profession of immunologists that this is, their job, and I cannot simplify, nor do I myself fully understand all the nuances that it comes to vaccinations. But pretty much what we do is we take a tiny, safe sample of the disease, and we inject it into our dog's immune system, usually up the nose, intranasally, or sub-Q, through an injection. And what happens is that the immune system, it starts to recognize that. So after a shot, the body makes antibodies from this disease, and they also create memory cells. So later, if the germ shows up, if your dog is exposed to that disease, your dog or cat can fight it off faster, so illness is prevented, or is usually much milder as well. So here's how that looks like in vet practice. A small amount of the antigen, the thing that is trying to trigger the immune system, or the thing that the immune system is learning, is pretty much what is in a vaccine. And some vaccines can include other things as well, for a variety of different purposes, to protect against some really common diseases too. And so we also have to think about what are we vaccinating for. So there's usually core vaccines, and then there's non-core vaccines. So core vaccines, these are going to be the things, and we're going to talk about dogs specifically. Sorry, cat lovers. I stay in my lane when I can. So our core vaccines for our dogs are going to be distemper, parvovirus, and adenovirus, or adenovirus. It depends on who you're talking to. Tomato. And then we have non-core vaccinations, and these are usually non-core because they're based off of where you live, the area that you live, if it's prominent in your area, and also the lifestyle that you choose to do with your dog. So this can be things like leptospirosis. You don't really have to worry about leptospirosis if you don't live in an area with a lot of rats. Kennel cough is another one, right? You don't really have to worry about kennel cough unless your dog is going out and socializing with other dogs. Rabies is one of them. I think it's considered a core vaccination, but you don't really have the choice, I guess, if you're going to get it or not, because it's usually required by law. In Texas, you have to have an up-to-date vaccination for your dog, or else you can get yourself into some trouble. So there's, different types of vaccinations that we're looking for. And then again, there's also the live versus the killed vaccinations that, again, we're not going to get into that. So to make a vaccination, not only do we have the antigen, in which that we are, the small sample of the disease that we're trying to teach our immune system to protect against, but there's also a couple of things that are going to go in there as well, to keep it sterile, to preserve the product, and all of these are other ingredients that have a purpose, but also these additives are something to kind of keep in mind, because from my research that I read, it's these things that typically cause the adverse reactions. So additives are, some of them can be immune boosters, which means that they're going to be boosting the immune system to have a bigger response to the antigen. Therefore, the theory is that it creates a bigger protection to it. There's also going to be some sterilizers, because depending on how big the vial is, some vets will draw the vaccine into a syringe from a vial and then give what's in the syringe to your dog, but there's still more in the vial, therefore for other dogs, right? So we might be having the same bottle being punctured multiple times. So there's going to be more sterilizing agents in there as well. And then of course preservatives, because vaccines can expire, right? And for a vet to sell them and to keep stock, there must be some preservatives to keep it shelf stable. So these can be things like aluminum salts, oil emulsions, phenols, even things like formaldehyde as well. Which to me, when I read formaldehyde, I'm like, I don't think I want that in my dog's body or in mine, but that's just me. So these guys are usually the reason why there might be some vaccine reactions like those bumps, those irritation, the redness to the injection site as well. This can also be a reason too why you may want to consider giving less vaccinations at one time. Very interestingly, I had a client who has a puppy and I was doing private lessons with them. They did not want to come. I think one of their dogs in the past had parvo, so they're very conscious about those decisions. They wanted me to go over to their house. They wanted me to take off my shoes, all that stuff, which I definitely don't mind. And we talk a bunch about different stuff, and somehow we got onto the conversation about vaccines. And I was like, wow, I feel like we've been working for a while, and your puppy's still not done with vaccines. And he was like, well, I chose to not do 3 different vaccinations all at the same time. A lot of your vaccinations are going to be combos. So whenever you're looking at your receipt, sure, like Bordetella probably stands alone, but there's many strains in that, right? Rabies is usually something that's given on its own, but there's usually a combo of DHPP, DHLP, and those are combinations as to everything that's in there. And so he was like, I wanted all of those things to be given one at a time. Number one, so that way it wouldn't overload my dog's system. You're a brand new puppy, and yes, they do have antibodies from mom, from when they were born, and then also from like breast milk and things like that, from nursing. He just didn't want his dog to have all these vaccinations at once, because if he did have some sort of negative reaction to a vaccine, it'd be really great to know which one of these caused an adverse reaction. And his vet kind of, and I did not hear the conversation, this is just from my client's perspective, he's like, the vet thought I was crazy for wanting to spread them out so much. Sure, it takes more time, right? It takes more trips to the vet. But in my opinion, that was one way that this client was able to be responsible and kind of take the lead on his dog's, vet care, especially when it comes to vaccines specifically. That was not the normal. He had some critical thinking there, and the vet even kind of thought like, dude, you're weird, because this is the way we always do it, and if, we always do it this way, so it should be fine. His puppy did end up having an adverse reaction to something. I don't remember which one, but he was able to pinpoint which one of the vaccinations it was, because he gave it to them one at a time. So things like that, right? Another thing randomly that I have thrown in my notes, because there are injectables, and then there's also intranasal vaccinations, especially for Bordetella. I've seen both be done. I had one vet tell me, because again, I like to ask people, why did you choose to do an injectable Bordetella versus an intranasal? Why is it a 6 month? Why is it a 1 year for some? Like, vaccine math is very interesting, because the vet can kind of not make up. I'm not saying that they're just like doing it all willy-nilly, but they can kind of pinpoint how long and how they're going to be giving that vaccination. So one of those things is the Bordetella. It can be given intranasally up the nose, or it can be injectable. I've had one vet tell me that the injectable one is stronger. And then I had one vet tell me that the reason why they choose to do the injectable is because it's usually easier to give, right? It's easier to poke your dog on the back or on the haunches versus to shove something up their nose. But interestingly, after doing some research, Bordetella is one that we really do want up the nose, because whenever I can be introducing that disease and the way that the disease is going to be introduced to the dog in a normal environment, in a real life environment. So for Bordetella, it's a airborne disease. Your dog is going to get it by breathing in the germs from other dogs, by licking things. So it's all mucosal lining, the lining of the mucous membranes in the nose and in the mouth. And so whenever we do that, whenever we give an intranasal, we're building up mucosal immunity, and that is actually stronger than just giving the injectable, because we're starting to create that defense
where the disease is being introduced, usually the nose, sometimes the mouth. And so that tends to be a little bit better. So if you are going to be giving your dog Bordetella vaccinations, consider that you're going to be doing intranasal instead of injectable ones, despite what your vet might say. Or maybe ask them, right? Ask them, like, why do you do that? Oh, well, I heard, this one chick on a podcast say mucosal immunity is probably a little bit better for this one. What do you think about that? And again, you can have a conversation with your vet. So let's talk about those 6-month versus 1 year Bordetella, and also the 1 year versus the 3-year rabies. So again, vaccine math, that's just I don't want to say that they do what they want to do, but every vet will do something a little bit different. It's not a standardized approach, right? So what are those different things for you to know, so that way you can be having some sort of understanding for the care that your dog is getting. So these vaccinations are the same. The 6-month versus the 1 year Bordetella is literally the same. The 1 year and the 3 year rabies is literally the same thing. They're not bigger dosages of the other. There's not more antibodies shoved into one versus the other. They are the same. They are not higher dosages or anything like that. So considerations for the 6-month Bordetella versus the 1 year Bordetella. Bordetella tends to morph and change every, I don't know how long, right? But it's kind of like the flu vaccination. When you go get the flu vaccine, it's going to be giving you protection from the strains that we had last year, or I don't know how many years back, but previous strains, right? It's not going to be able to know what new strains have morphed and created themselves into for this year's flu. So that's why if you get a flu vaccination, you might still get the flu, right? So that's the same thing with the Bordetella vaccination. And from what I can tell, the reason why vets would like to do 6-month is because it's at least still introducing your dog to a new strain, because I don't know how often manufacturers will change their strain, but I think it just kind of keeps your dog their immune system more in the know of the new strains that are going on. That's also one thing too, where maybe if your dog goes to like a doggy daycare or boarding on a very frequent basis, maybe you want to consider a 6-month. Whereas if your dog just kind of goes to grooming once every 3 months and hardly, if you don't take them to the dog park, there's not much exposure, maybe you want to consider the 1 year. My dogs haven't had a Bordetella vaccine in a really long time because I titer. But we're going to circle back to that in a second. The rabies vaccination, right? So again, vaccine math is very interesting. So from what I can tell and read, we do want to do the puppy vaccinations, and usually that takes a process that is complete at around 4 months of age, about 16 weeks. And so we give the initial something. Some of those things we booster. I know some vets who will booster a Bordetella within that puppy time frame for the initial and 1 booster. I know a lot of vets who don't booster. Why are we boostering? Why are some choosing to booster? Why are some of them not? I don't know. But typically we'll give a booster every 3 to 4 weeks. So we'll have, and especially too for the distemper kiddos, right? So the distemper, basically those core vaccinations that I just mentioned before, it usually comes in a DHLPP or a DHPP. We'll get the initial, and then there's usually 2 to 3 boosters. Again, every vet's a little bit different. And then the rabies vaccination is one that you just give the 1. And then there's typically a 1 year booster. So they will get the rabies around 16 weeks of age, and that usually is also when they're completing everything else. And then they won't get another rabies until that 1 year. Okay, so a year after the initial rabies, we do the 1 year. Typically after that, every rabies that you can get after that can be a 3 year. But then I have some vets that will say, well, you missed that 1 year by a week, so we have to do a 1 year again. As if the antibodies are a ticking time bomb that are just going to expire exactly on the day. And to me, that's one of the things that I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me, because why is it, how come 1 more week completely ruins my chances of getting a 3-year vaccination? But the 1 year and the 3 year rabies vaccine at least are the exact same. I don't know. I feel like I did know someone who did a 3-year distemper, and I have no idea who that was. but I want to say that may be a thing as well. So why should we question annual vaccination? So I'm going to share with you guys a study, and I'm going to link it in the show notes as well in case you are a nerd like me and like to read through those things. But a study that was done in 2010, it shared that in naturally exposed environments, antibodies persisted up to 14 years after vaccination for canine distemper, canine adenovirus, and 10 years for canine parvovirus. That is a long time. Now, in natural exposed environments, right, this was just the willy-nilly dog. This was the dog who, natural pet dog, you know, the dog that just naturally just lives life. Go to dog park sometimes, boarding, grooming, you know, our dogs. What your dog and my dog live is a naturally exposed environments. In virus-free colonies, and I forgot if this was like Petri dish colony, I think that's what it was, or if it was, yeah, that's what it had to be. There's no such thing as a static environment in which the dog is never going to have a virus. But the minimum duration of immunity by antibody persistence was 9 years for distemper, adenovirus, and parvovirus. And then dogs challenged 4 to 9 years post-vaccination, so they were put into specific situations where they were going to be exposed to the vaccination. So 4 to 9 years after their initial vaccination, or not the initial vaccination, but after the boosters and things were done, they resisted infection and illness, supporting that positive titers correlate with real protection as well. So 2 of these things say, I mean, we challenged them 4 to 9 years, but you know, that's not really the test for the antibodies. The antibodies that we were testing them for, the smallest amount of time that we have there is 10 years. Your dog has antibodies for 10 years after vaccination, but yet we are giving vaccinations every year. And for me, that is something to consider, and that is something that we should be critically thinking. So if the purpose of a vaccination is to help the body build immunity and protection through antibodies and memory cells, and if these studies are saying that your dog can have protection for up to 10 years, 10 to 14 years, again, why the heck are we vaccinating our dogs every freaking year? And this is why I love titers, because we don't want to just gamble, right? Every dog is going to be different. Every dog's going to have a different exposure. I feel like every dog's probably going to hold on to those antibodies a little bit differently. Every dog's immune system is going to be working at different paces. So a titer test is something that's super important because it allows for you to test how much antibodies is in your dog's system per disease, and for you to make the appropriate decision on whether or not you should go get a vaccination. So a titer test, what happens in a titer test is the vet tech or the vet will take a simple blood draw, and they're going to spin it down and they separate it into serum. Now, we're not going to get into all the different parts of blood, but there's different parts in blood. And then they send off this sample to usually a lab, most likely out of state, and depending on where you live. And this is going to measure the antibodies for specific diseases. For dogs, the titers that are most useful and validated are the ones for the 3 core vaccinations. That's distemper, adenovirus, and parvovirus, the ones that we just talked about, that the study showed that your dog has immunity for up to 10 to 14 years. If your dog has a positive titer for these, that strongly suggests that protection is still there and that a booster is not needed right now. If the titer test is negative, it does not necessarily mean that your dog's not protected, because there's also immunotherapy. There's those memory cells. So your dog can have immunity through antibodies and through memory cells. Unfortunately, the titer test does not test memory cells. It only tests for antibodies. So even though you have a negative test, or maybe the antibodies are at such a low level, that doesn't necessarily mean that your dog's not protected, but because that's really the only standard of which that we can test, it probably is wise to vaccinate, especially if your dog is still going to be exposed to these different things. So most people will tend to re-vaccinate there at that point, right? Now, titers are not the most reliable when it comes to certain things. So for example, leptospirosis, that's a non-core vaccination. I remember titering Rishi 3 years ago for lepto, and the antibodies came back positive, that was there, and I forgot why my vet told me, but it's not reliable. I don't know if like those antibodies tend to die faster or what the case may be. And we had just moved into a house. This was in 2021, 2, something like that. I think it was April of 2022 that we moved into the house. And so we're kind of in a newer development, and we back up along like this green belt where there could be a lot of rats. So I said, okay, let's go ahead and re-booster her for that. But I haven't done that since. Kennel cough is another one, I think, because it just changes and mutates so often that it might not be worth it, especially if you're going to be taking your dog to lots of those different places. But again, I haven't vaccinated my dogs for Bordetella in quite some time because I only take them to daycare and all the other dogs around them are also protected. I'm not going to take my dogs whenever they're sick. And also their immune systems are pretty fluffy because we do a lot of different stuff. Canine influenza is another one for the same reason why people like to get yearly vaccinations for the flu. And Lyme disease is another one that they don't really suggest. They don't really promote strong titers for. But, at least for the core 3 that you have, there are also rabies titers as well that I like to look into. However, our hands are kind of tied with that one because of laws. And I would really love to somehow find a way to change legislation with that. That is done at a state level, and I don't know anyone that works in the state. So if you happen to know somebody, send them my way so we can have that conversation. Because I think it just starts with, these conversations of just bringing these different things and these different tests to say, like, there's been antibodies and there's really no need to revaccinate so often. Okay, let's talk about a negative titer. So a negative titer might be one that the lab has like a certain cutoff of levels of antibodies. And if it's at that cutoff or below, they're most likely going to suggest that you get your vaccination again just to reboost all those antibodies again. So they might either be undetectable, that the test didn't find any antibodies in there, or they might be detectable but too low. And again, we're also not testing for those memory cells as well. So after the initial puppy series and you have the 1-year booster after that, many adult dogs can maintain that protective immunity to distemper, adenovirus, and parvovirus for years based off that study, sometimes for a long time. I think 10 to 14 years is quite a long time. Like if Sully's 16, or he's going to be 16 in October. He's coming to life right now. And, I got him vaccinations after vaccinations many years in a row, and it wasn't until the past 3-4 years that we've been titering. He most likely has immunity for the rest of his life. So some people will choose to follow the typical 3-year booster interval, right? As long as you don't miss that, don't lap in that 1 year. Try to go for those 3-year vaccinations. Maybe 3-year is a comfortable thing. Maybe you don't want to test immunity for 4, 5, 6, 10 years, but maybe 3 years sounds comfortable for you. What I choose to do, I'm going to do one more titer this year. So I've titered the past 3 to 4 years every year. And now the more that I'm reading about stuff, they're saying you really only have to titer once every 3 years, right? Because if the vaccine is good for 3 years, then those titers, those antibody levels should be kind of living in the body for about 3 years. So after we do our titer this year, I will start to titer every 3 years. Now, pros and cons. Titers are a snapshot in time, right? You can only know the antibodies level test. You can only know the antibody levels of your dog at the time of test. It's not going to show you your dog's levels are this, so we can't expect for it to be this in 3 months, 6 months, whatever. It really is a snapshot in time. But the same thing kind of goes for those vaccinations, which is why we have to test them. We also can choose to revaccinate annually just to be on the safe side. So again, if that feels what's comfortable for you, then go for it. If you want to do every 3 years because that's what's comfortable for you, whether it's the vaccine or the titer, again, you go for it. I think cost is another thing that's pretty prohibitory for, I think that's the right word, for titers. They're typically not less expensive than a vaccine, because the vaccine your vet already has on the shelf. They already know how to squirt, jab, shoot into your dog. It's a pretty easy thing, right? And also because it's very standardized. Titers are not very standardized, so some vets won't even do it. And like I said before, most vets will take the sample, spin the sample down, and then they have to send it to a lab. Most labs are out of state unless you live in Kansas, and I forget what the other one is. But I just learned that Texas A&M offers the Core 3 for $25. I think it's actually $24. But I think there's also like an initial client fee of like $8 or something like that. But if you mail it to them, or if you take it to them yourself, maybe you want to take a nice day trip to College Station, you can get those titer tests done for $25. And that's something that I'm very much interested in, because you can just tell your vet, can you take a blood sample and can you spin it down and can you give it to me? And then of course you still have to pay for shipping if you're going to take it over there. You probably will have to overnight ship it. I don't know if there's like ice involved. Don't know. I don't think so. Or again, you can also drive it over there yourself for a nice 3-hour trip from San Antonio. So, but like I said, a lot of vets won't do them. I've called a few vets and the front desk staff doesn't even know what a titer test is, just because they're not common practice, they're not standard practice, but I'm hoping that we are moving more towards that happening. So yeah, costs can be high, but if you're going to be doing titer test on a tri-annual basis, if your goal is to titer test once every 3 years, and you know that if I take that antibody test now and I'm going to choose to believe, or going to go off of those, that means I have protection for 3 years. That means that you're not having to drive to the vet once a year for 3 years and getting all of those vaccinations. I also think this is a great alternative for those of us who may be immunocompromised in different ways, and you should not be having vaccinations every year. For those dogs who are nervous and scared of going to the vet, we can test those antibodies and know, like, okay, you don't have to go for another 3 years, which can actually make things a little bit worse too if you're just hardly ever doing it. But it's not like going once a year is making that better. I apologize for those of you guys who can see Sully's butt. He's cruising. So yeah, those are what titer tests are. Very simple, very easy, can be a little more costly, but if you choose to, just question annual vaccinations, if you want to decrease your dog's chemical load in that sense, that's a very important thing for you to consider. So if those of you guys who live in San Antonio, Pup and Away is offering a titer clinic, which I'm very excited about. We are partnering up with Affordable Pet Labs, and if for those of you guys who don't know what Affordable Pet Labs is, these people will actually go to your home and do the blood draws, and I think that most of their stuff, they have the lab to do a lot of their tests, but it's pretty nice and convenient because they'll come to you and they can run a variety of different tests. So I'll put a link in the show notes about Affordable Pet Lab so that way you can see what other tests that they offer. But they will be stopping by Pup and Away on Saturday, September 6th from 1 to 3, offering these blood draws and then taking your tests or taking your samples and testing them in their lab. And in a matter of about a week or so, you'll be getting your results. If that is something that you're interested in, I will also be dropping down the sign-up sheet for that one because there is some pre-information that they want to get beforehand, right? Your name, your dog's name, about how old they are, and then also pricing is in there as well. So we have different packages, and these are done at a discount because we're doing like an event clinic versus they're driving to one single person's house. So if you guys are interested in that, I highly recommend that you check out the show notes, sign up for the clinic, again, happening at Pup and Away. We are located off of San Pedro and Hildebrand area, and that will be taking place Saturday, September 6th from 1 to 3, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. I hope that you guys enjoyed that podcast, and I hope that I have considered you guys to reconsider or at least question annual vaccination because, again, as someone who has titered my dogs for the past 3 years and I haven't needed to give my dogs vaccinations, we can be smart with our decisions, and yeah, I think just annual vaccinations is a a little overkill. So I will see you guys at the next one. Thanks for tuning in.
Now, that might be the end of the episode, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. Follow us on social media. I'd love to connect with you. We have quite a few social media platforms. For nutrition and holistic pet care tips, follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Steph the Pro Dog Mom. You can find fun training tips on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Pup and Away SA. If you're in San Antonio and you want to bring your dog to us for boarding, training, socialization, and nutrition, come find us. But if you're not in San Antonio, we do training and nutrition sessions virtually. Yes, they can be just as effective, I promise. Please rate, review, and subscribe to my podcast on whatever platform you listen on. And please, please, please share with a friend. The positive reinforcement of knowing people actually listen to this and find it valuable helps motivate me to keep on recording. We'll see you guys at the next episode.